First Republic Bank collapses. Now, this is something that many people saw coming because recently we had the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, and now, a month later, we have another bank that has collapsed. What does that mean for us, people of African descent? What does that mean for people who are oppressed? Well, let's find out. First Republic collapse sparks regional bank shares sell-off. Shares of several regional lenders have fallen on Monday after the collapse of First Republic Bank, the third major casualty of the biggest crisis to hit the banking sector in the United States since 2008. The banking turmoil erupted from the closure of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in March, causing depositors to flee regional lenders and driving fears that the crisis could engulf other mid-sized banks. The KBW Regional Banking Index shed 2.7% on Monday, hitting a session low, while shares of Citizen Financial Group, PNC Financial Services Group, Truist Financial Corp., and U.S. Bank Corp. Fell between 3% and 7%. Valley National Bank Corp., which owns Valley National Bank, lost more than 20%. A deal was announced earlier on Monday that allows for an orderly failure of First Republic. Under the terms, JP Morgan Chase will pay $10.6 billion to the U.S. Federal Deposit Insurance Corp., which took First Republic into receivership for most of the failed bank's assets. The article goes on to say that this marks the second largest failure on records. Still, unlike Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, the FDIC had a buyer waiting in the wings. And so this is not going to appear as though it's as bad as the last bank failure that we've seen happen. However, please understand that when it comes to these types of FDIC maneuvers, when you have the insurance back jump in and give some type of assurance to people who have their money deposited in these banks, that's not something that is really going to be of much help when we see more banks start collapsing, because even for the FDIC, there's not enough money that they have. No matter how much they tell you that your money is safe, your money is safe. Well, your money is safe as long as they have money. However, if all the major banks collapse in the United States, is that going to help you whenever the FDIC cannot even insure every single person? Well, of course it wouldn't. So that's a false way to make people feel secure even when you're not secure. But I want to go to another article that discusses this bank failure. U.S. banks are failing and the authorities seem unlikely to intervene. Shares in more than 2 U.S. regional banks have been suspended. Regulators moved in to halt trading in Los Angeles-based PacWest and Arizona Western Alliance on Thursday after they became the latest victims of an escalating crisis that began with Silicon Valley Bank back in March. The message from central banks and bank supervisors is that this is not a return of the global financial crisis of 2008. We're going to keep hearing about 2008 because this was the last time where the entire world was pulled into a crisis because of the United States. Now, there's warning in telling us that it's not as bad as 2008. And their reason is because with the exception of Switzerland's Credit Suisse, European banks have escaped the turmoil. It is specific U.S. banks that are the problem. So that is something significant. You're seeing other banks not being affected by the fact that the United States seems to be having a banking collapse. What that tells you is that we're moving into a world where the U.S. dollar, the U.S. system of finance is not going to be determinative of the rest of the world. If you need more information on that, you could watch the session I did on the U.S., the fact that the United States is falling as an empire. Now, it goes on and says there are a number of reasons for that. The business models of banks concerned, failures of regulation, the large number of small and mid-sized banks in the U.S., and the rapid increase in interest rates from the country's central bank, the Federal Reserve. All of these are causes or attributors to the banking collapse. They said unless the Fed rides to the rescue with cuts in the interest rate, we know the Fed has been instead increasing the interest rate and not cutting it. The options are amalgamation, regulation, or more banks going to bust. The response of the U.S. authorities suggests little appetite for a laissez-faire approach. The U.S. authorities certainly do not seem adverse to further amalgamation. When First Republic ran into trouble, it was seized by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and its deposits and its assets were sold to one of the giants of U.S. banking, J.P. Morgan and Chase. Inevitably, there will be more takeovers and fire sales of assets as alternatives to bank failures. It's reasonable to assume that in 10 years' time, the number of U.S. banks will be considerably smaller than it is today. Think about the previous story we just did, talking about who came to the rescue. J.P. Morgan and Chase, a bank that has been in power for a long time, a bank that has deep state alliances, deep state connections, are very well ingrained in the establishment bank, comes to the rescue of a smaller bank. This article is alluding to the fact that very soon there's only going to be a handful of banks, and these are the banks that are already running the world, but now they don't have to do it in the shadows. They can essentially be out in the open as far as being the one and only, as far as most of the transactions happening in the U.S. One might even think that someday we'll be going directly to the Federal Reserve for our currency. That's something that's also being discussed as a possibility. Now, how is this affecting African people? How is this affecting us throughout the world? The article gives some assurances that this is not like 2008. The reason is because while the United States seems to be suffering, other countries are not. But one thing that it doesn't talk about, and the next article also does mention this, is that while the banks are not collapsing in other countries, if the U.S. banks do collapse and if U.S. is sent through a recession, that absolutely will have a worldwide impact. That's when you will see the impact to every single person, not just in the United States, in Europe, not just in Europe, even places like Africa. You're going to see an effect, a domino effect, just like we've seen in 2008. Because when the U.S. has a cough, the whole world gets sick, right? So this is the reality that we're in. Now, we as African people have to know that this system is collapsing very quickly. And I say very quickly because we see things exacerbating at a very rapid speed. Do not look away whenever you see banks collapsing. That's a mistake that many of us make. We think that because we don't see it in our bank or we don't see our accounts, we don't see us being the ones who are suffering, we think that these things are far and distant. That's what they rely on, basically you being in the matrix and thinking that your day-to-day celebrity news, your day-to-day sports commentary, your day-to-day Twitter feeds, that's your reality. No, the reality is happening, and whether or not you're ready to face it, it's going to happen at rapid speed. So for that reason, it's important for us to be prepared. Interestingly enough, I did run into this one article that alluded to Black people, particularly, that we needed to be concerned about what's happening with these bank collapses. And this is an interesting news article that just flashed up on yahoo.com. And I thought it was interesting because of all people to write an article about with this financial collapse, they chose to write this article about us. So let's read through this. The U.S. is on the brink of a financial crisis. Black Americans should be concerned. This is written by The Root, by the way. So it says, not to be dramatic, but hearing the news that the United States could be on the brink of a financial disaster in a few weeks was not exactly how we'd hoped to kick off the month. On Monday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen announced that the United States could run out of money to meet our obligations as soon as June 1st. That means for the first time in our country's history, we could end up defaulting on our debt, which is a big problem if you enjoy not being in the midst of another Great Recession. Despite knowing for months that the United States had officially hit the debt ceiling, which is $31 trillion, we still don't have a deal to raise the limit. For folks wondering why that's such a problem, we'll break it down as simply as possible. The debt limit is the amount of money the federal government can borrow to meet their existing funding obligations. That includes Medicare, Social Security, loan payments, and Congress regularly votes to increase this limit so that we, the United States, could borrow more and keep paying our bills, including our national debts. Now, before I go into the article, I want to hit on a few points. Number one, as they said, this is going to affect Medicare, Social Security, and loan payments. Probably also a lot of things that are affecting you, right? This is going to cripple people who rely on the government for help. And they know this. That's why they're not talking about it so much in the news, or that's why they're trying to downplay it. That's why you'll see CNN focused on Trump's indictments and not on the economy. Because the fact is that if you realize that you rely on systems, or that your relatives, your grandma, your mother relies on these systems, and if these systems are on the brink of collapse, you might become alarmed. Now, it's important to also understand, though, that this thing has been a long time coming. Every single year this happens, the debt ceiling gets raised. The debt ceiling gets raised. There's always going to be a deal. And by the way, I do think more than likely, probably the night before, if not hours before the U.S. defaults on its debt, that Congress will probably reach a deal. That's what usually happens just right before they're about to default on their debt, because no politician wants to be sitting in office whenever the U.S. economy disappears from the earth. But regardless of that, understand that's literally just kicking the can down the road. Eventually, the debt in the United States is going to be a real problem, and it's coming very quickly and very soon. Not just the fact that the debt is becoming more and more high, but also the fact that it's basically owned by economies that are adverse to the United States. For example, we know that the United States wants to incite war with China. What happens with the fact that most of their debt is owned by China? What happens when China pulls that trigger alarm saying pay up now? Is the United States people going to be inside of a good situation then? Of course not, because basically you're going to see another situation. That's when a creditor demands payment. So we're not inside of a stable position, no matter what the politicians are telling us, no matter what solutions they're giving us. Even if they do raise the debt ceiling, it doesn't mean that our problems are going to disappear. If anything, they become more exacerbated the more and more this debt continues to increase without a plan to actually pay it back. So let's go on and read this article. So it goes on to say, unfortunately, this isn't the kind of crisis Black Americans can afford to ignore. Emphasize, we cannot afford to ignore this. A deep recession would, in all likelihood, be devastating for Black Americans. Studies have shown that Black Americans are generally among the first groups to be laid off when unemployment is high and the slowest demographic to recover after a recession. Going to repeat that again. We are generally the first group to be laid off, and we are generally the slowest demographic to recover after a recession. Black Americans would be disproportionately harmed if the government can no longer fund social welfare programs, including Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Just take Social Security, for example. A 2017 study found that 35% of elderly married Black couples and 58% of unmarried Black older adults relied on Social Security for 90% of their income. Now, House Republicans have passed a bill to raise the debt limit. However, they included a bunch of spending cuts and new work requirements for people receiving government benefits, including food programs such as SNAP, meaning food stamps are on the chopping block right now. The bill is unlikely to go anywhere since President Joe Biden is currently pushing for Congress to raise the limits without extracting any concessions. Is that going to go forward? Is Joe Biden actually going to get them to pass and increase the debt limit without any concessions? I personally doubt that, but we're going to see how this plays out. More than likely, both sides are going to compromise and things will appear to go back to normal as they usually do. The concern you should have is that while this is happening, while war is happening, while the banks are collapsing, the United States has put us inside of a situation where those of us who might genuinely need help are now watching the tide turn against the U.S.'s favor. And we're locked into a situation where if the system goes down, many of us will unfortunately go down with it. The other irony in this, however, is that while this is happening to us, we're being told to watch sports. We're being told to watch celebrity news. We're being told to talk about things that have nothing to do with our condition. So this is why we have to make sure we're vigilant in understanding what is happening inside of the economy, because if not, you're probably not prepared. Hopefully you take this story as a signal and a sign that you need to be making preparations for what's going to happen next. In Britain, people were preparing for the coronation of King Charles, a part of the British royal family, a part of the family that controls a lot of things behind the scenes that you might not be privy to. But it's an elitist family, a family that is a part of the real establishment, the one that you see and the one that you don't see. Many people, again, they're not happy about King Charles being King Charles. Unfortunately, they didn't have that same energy for Queen Elizabeth being Queen Elizabeth. Like, she actually didn't sit on the chair and watch colonized people being massacred all over the world. No, they let her go with that because she was Queen Elizabeth. King Charles might not get away with those same things, however. Now, something that has come out is a lot of people using this as a time to protest the British monarchy and their genocidal, murderous campaigns throughout the world. And we're going to talk about that. This story, it says, King Charles is urged to acknowledge the British Empire's legacy of genocide. Ahead of the coronation of King Charles III, Indigenous and other advocacy groups from 12 British Commonwealth countries have called on the new British monarch to, on the date of his coronation, acknowledge the horrific impacts on and the legacy of genocide and colonization of the indigenous and enslaved people. They want him to do this on the day of his coronation. King Charles maintains the official head of state for members of the British Commonwealth, a group of countries that were part of Britain's former colonial empire. And for context, even though they're not technically a part of the empire, they're still a part of the British colonial system. They're still beholden to Charles. They still fall in line with a lot of the protocols and the laws of the British Commonwealth system. And so even though colonialism has on paper been eradicated, in many ways, it's still a literal colonial relationship playing out before us. Now it says in the letter dated on May 4th, representatives from organizations from Antigua, Barbuda, Australia, Bahamas, Belize, Canada, Grenada, Jamaica, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts, Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines call on King Charles to immediately commit to starting discussions about reparations, repatriating remains, and returning cultural artifacts. I'm just going to tell y'all right now, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We have to get out of having reparations conversations where someone's being given the option. What you want to be in a situation is when the person doesn't have an option, when the person is having their backs against the wall and they realize they have no choice. That's not what's going to happen inside of this situation because, frankly, he'll do what he always does. That is, ignore the noise, be quiet, stay away from those who are too woke, too loud, too activist-ish, whatever. He'll stay away from those types of people, those types of reporters, and he'll do what he always does. Ignore the plights of people who suffered from his empire and pretend that everything is fine and well. So just to let you all know, that's not going to happen. But let's say, we stand united in engaging a process to right the wrongs of the past and continue the process of decolonization, the letter says. And the process of decolonization does not begin or end or start with apologies, if that's what they're trying to achieve. But for some reason, we live in a day in a world where people think apologies actually mean something to the oppression of people. It doesn't mean anything to apologize. What means something is actually having the power to enforce your rights. And we don't have the power to enforce our rights when someone else controls our rights. They said we stand united in engaging a process to right the wrongs of the past. I think I read that. It goes on to say we are united in our struggle to create a world free of vestiges of racism and oppression that still pervade today and are a direct legacy of the dehumanization of our first peoples and enslaved peoples that has occurred throughout the colonial era. Nova Paris, a former Australian senator and co-chair of the Australia Republican movement, who signed the letter, said in a statement that the group was looking to King Charles for an apology, reparation, and repatriation of our artifacts and our remains, and to acknowledge the horrific and enduring impacts of the legacy of genocide, colonization of the indigenous and enslaved peoples as well. That's a lot that they're looking for from Charles, but unfortunately, like I said, it's not going to happen. So my question to those who are protesting, my question to those who have those lists of demands is that when he does, not if he does, when he does ignore your calls for justice, what are you going to do next? And you should always have a what are you going to do next? Because what they rely on is you going to the next issue, and then basically they get to push you to the side while they continue to hold power over you. But this is what's happening, and this is what the conversation is. Unfortunately, not much will change, but we do know that what will continue to happen is the push for true justice and equality, true justice as far as the things that have been done to our people, and to equality as far as not having our power determined by those who have been adverse to us. That will never end, and that fight will never die until we actually do get true justice, not some fake reparations that are going to silence us until we go to the next issue. But with that, I want to talk a lot about the story of Haiti. Haiti is on the brink of civil war. It's being reported that Haiti is on the brink of civil war. This is an article from Al Jazeera saying Haiti is on the brink of civil war. The humanitarian group Mercy Corps has warned as violence between criminal gangs and civilian risk spiraling. Before I finish or continue reading, I would definitely love to hear from people on the ground as far as, is this the actual thing that's happening on the ground in Haiti? Or are these claims being overblown? Because from the coverage, it does look like something serious is happening. So would love some more context from anyone who has more information to give. But what's being reported is that there's escalating violence, particularly in the capital of Port-au-Prince, where gangs have taken over large parts of the city. Families are losing access to basic necessities, including food and clean water, the group added. I don't trust the Mercy Corps, so again, please do give us information from the ground, or those of you who have connections to people on the ground. The population has been pushed to make impossible decisions, like choosing between taking children to a hospital or a health clinic to treat cholera at risk of being at the risk of being kidnapped and killed, or stay home and hoping that things will get better. Jules added that many residents are starting to question why not seek revenge and take justice into their own hands. Last week, supposedly there's footage of this online. I have not watched it, will not watch this, but they said last week a mob lynched at least 13 gang members who have been arrested in Port-au-Prince. Haiti's de facto prime minister, Ariel Henry, has faced a crisis of legitimacy because he's not legitimate. Him, as well as the previous president, Moise, both of them are sitting in a seat that was not elected or chosen by the people. Both of them are chosen by the United States and the United States elites. None of them are representative of the people. He's illegitimate. He was chosen for the post by Moise just days before the president was killed. What a coincidence. Presidential and legislative elections have been postponed indefinitely since 2021, preventing any political transitions. Mercy Corps, which provides cash assistance to tens of thousands of people in Haiti, said on Monday that nearly half of the country's population is starving because of this crisis. Now, assuming that what's being reported in the news by a number of sources is true, this is obviously not a good situation. This is not an ideal situation, and this is an unfortunate situation because, once again, the people of Haiti have suffered so much, particularly from the imperialist and colonialist systems that have had their foot on our people's necks, continually. Haiti represents liberation. Haiti represents us being able to rule ourselves, us being able to be separate from this system. That's what Haiti represented. But because they wanted to be separate, they had to suffer the most. And that's why Haiti has become this example of what it is that will happen to you if you seek liberation and don't get it through us, don't get some surface level liberation, but you actually force the hand of your oppressor to let you go. If you do that, then you will be punished. And to this day, they still punish Haiti for killing their colonial oppressors. And our people suffer for it. Definitely keeping our thoughts, prayers, and really our solidarity with the people of Haiti, because what they continue to suffer because of the colonial governments is just reprehensible. This will probably try to be used, Hopefully it won't be successful, but this will probably try to be used by entities like the United Nations to have another intervention. We know the United States recently did an intervention in Haiti. We know that the United Nations has been eyeing Haiti for a while, trying to use justification to go back in with their peace corps. Hopefully that does not happen, but we know that that's what they're eyeing to do. So certainly we'll keep our eyes and our hearts with Haiti, because we have to not let go of the fact that people are actively trying to derail their freedom. By the way, on March 24th, the United States, the White House of the president, had released a fact sheet where they explained their policy towards a number of countries. These countries include coastal West Africa, Haiti, Libya, Mozambique, Papua New Guinea. So I want to just briefly read what their plan, their publicly stated plan is for the island nation. They should not have a plan for Haiti, right? Because they've done so much destruction already. But this is what the United States put out. They said, in Haiti, the United States aims to foster stabilization in communities impacted by violence while systematically addressing underlying drivers of conflict over time and mitigating the impact of future climate shocks. The United States aims to build on mechanisms for consultation with a broad range of Haitian stakeholders to support locally driven peace and stability. I just wanted to add this quick excerpt to the story because the narrative of the media really does matter. The narrative of the media right now is that things are so violent that everything's out of hand. Haiti's basically in a civil war. Now, if that is or if that isn't the case, if it is the case, it could very much be the case that those types of conflicts and violence is being incited by outside governments to basically give them the right or give them the perceived right to invade a country. But it could also be that the media is just overblowing things. Regardless of what it is, the United States has this beautiful plan laid out that they're going to work to end the impact on communities of violence. And of course, this is what they're using this story to back up. So this is another area that you want to be very, very careful with, whether you're peddling the imperialist narratives. And that's why we rely on people on the ground to give us the full story. This is an interesting story not a lot of people are talking about. Pope Francis has sacked a 64-year-old clergyman of Rwandan descent. His name is Wenceslas Monyesyaka. So sorry, people in Rwanda, because I know I butchered that, but I tried my best. And he has been serving as a priest inside of France for close to 30 years. Now, the Bishop of Urvo issued a communique, which has been circulating online, stating that Monyesyaka is excluded from continuing to serve as a priest anywhere else and automatically loses his clerical rights. Well, what did he lose them for? Well, the authenticity of the communique was confirmed by the Office of the Diocese of Urvo to the BBC, and it was revealed that the decision was based on a papal decree dating back to March. Monyesyaka, who fled to France following the Rwandan genocide in 1994, has not commented on the decision. In December of 2021, he was subpoenaed by his diocese after it was revealed that he had legally acknowledged fathering a 10-year-old boy. He had a child, and for some reason, people still follow the Catholic Church's decrees that celibacy is serving God in some way. Now, this is an interesting part of the story, though. So this is why they're going after him, because he has a child that's 10 years old. But Mr. Monyesyaka was ordained a priest in Rwanda in 1992, where he is accused of playing a role in the killings of hundreds of Tutsis who had fled to his church in the capital, Kigali, during the genocide. So he is accused, and there seems to be a lot of evidence that he is an accessory, a person who actually helped in the killing of hundreds of innocent people. He went to court in France, but he was cleared of genocide charges. Now, of course, the question is how crazy it is. I mean, for the Catholic Church to be willing to have someone inside of their organization who is accused of genocide. Yet at the same time, that's not enough to get him removed from his position. Having a child, a 10-year-old child, is, though. It's very crazy, and that made me actually want to look more into this man. So I did go to his Wikipedia page, and I found, it says he was a Rwandan priest, again working in France. He was convicted of genocide by a Rwandan military court. He was pursued in the French courts, but in October 2015, a case was not continued because of the quality of evidence. Despite the controversy in his Rwandan conviction, he has been employed as a priest in France since 2001. Going on, it says that he was responsible for Saint Famille Church and Parish in Kigali. A military tribunal in Rwanda found him guilty of rape and involvement in the 1994 genocide and sentenced him in absentia to life in prison. I want to repeat that. He was found guilty of rape. He raped someone, according to Rwandan courts. And also, he was a person who participated in the genocide. And this person fled to France, where he's been a priest this whole time. But they don't want to remove him from the Catholic Church organization for these things, for being found guilty of rape and being found guilty of genocide. They want to step in because he had a child. Okay. The military tribunal, I think I read that part. No, okay, I did not, sorry. Go back. He was found to have delivered hundreds of adults and children to genocidal militias, which brutally slaughtered them. The military tribunal found that Munyashaka guilty of rape and of aiding militias in the killing of hundreds of Tutsi refugees at the Holy Family Cathedral in downtown Kigali, where he was the head priest. Oof. In October 2015, the French government expressed disappointment that the French courts had decided to not progress the case any further. The Catholic Church employed him as a priest, despite all of this, and yet again he was excommunicated for having a child. This is just some foolishness, and the fact that we want to, makes me want to question, what are his ties? What are his deep state ties? The fact that this man really was accused of the most heinous acts that you could probably be accused of in the world. And yet this organization, like many other people who are accused in their organization, basically is this swept these under the rug and pretended like it didn't happen and kept him in his post. That really makes me think he has some type of ties and that there's something really else going on behind the scenes. This is all speculation, but I do want to hear your thoughts on this crazy and horrible story. What are your thoughts on why it is that this was essentially the straw that broke the camel's back as far as his affiliation with the Catholic Church? Now, this story is crazy, and it's crazy because it shows us how quickly things are changing in the world and how quickly the world is falling into chaos. Now, if you did not hear, Russia has accused Ukraine of trying to assassinate Vladimir Putin. Maybe you just think that this is just another installment of the war, just another accusation, things will go past, but this is being seen as an open and direct threat that the Ukrainians did completely against the Russian government, meaning, all hands on deck. We're going to do what we have to do to basically get rid of y'all. Let's look at this story. This is being reported by WION. They said, no choice but to physically eliminate Zelensky. That's what Russia said after a drone assassination attempt. After Russia alleged that Vladimir Putin was targeted by Ukraine in a drone assassination attack, the deputy chairman of the country's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, on Wednesday, called for the killing. You hear me? They're calling for the killing of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He said there are no other options left other than the physical elimination of the Ukrainian president. That is strong words, and that really shows you the point we're at. We're at a tipping point right now as far as what's happening. Now, he went on to say he gave a warning to Zelensky on Wednesday on his Telegram channel. He wrote, after today's terrorist attack, there are no options left other than the physical elimination of Zelensky and his clique. He said, It is not even needed for signing an instrument of unconditional surrender. Hitler, as is known, did not sign it either. There will always be some substitute. So this is a very significant escalation because essentially this means that Russia will not in any type of way negotiate peace with Ukraine, which, by the way, was a possibility a year ago. They were very open to negotiating peace, but because of instigators, i.e., the United States, that did not happen. Now, we want to go to what the U.S. Has, the allegations against the United States as far as this attack. So the U.S. has rejected Russia's ludicrous claim that it was behind an alleged attack on the Kremlin, that as Moscow warns of open armed conflict. Now, this is talking about open armed conflict, period, not just with Ukraine. The United States rejected a ludicrous accusation from Russia that it was behind an alleged drone attack on the Kremlin, as Moscow's deputy foreign minister warned the two powers that an open armed conflict could happen. Relations between the U.S. and Russia are at their lowest since the Cold War, but in the aftermath of Wednesday's purported drone attack on the Kremlin, the official residence of the Russian president, Moscow has dramatically dialed up its rhetoric. When asked by CNN if Moscow believed that the United States was behind the attack, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said, undoubtedly, such decisions, the definition of goals, the definition of means, all of this dictated to Kiev from Washington. We are well aware that decisions on such actions and such terrorist attacks are not made in Kiev, but in Washington. And Kiev is already executing what is told to do. Peskov did not provide any evidence of his claims nor any additional details regarding the alleged attack, saying that information would be released later. Earlier this week, Russia claimed that Ukraine launched a drone strike targeting the Kremlin in an attempt to assassinate Russian President Vladimir Putin, calling it a planned terrorist attack. John Kirby, the U.S. National Security Council coordinator for strategic communications, denied Russia's ludicrous claim that the U.S. directed Ukraine to carry out an alleged attack and kill Putin, and accused the president's spokesperson of lying. I would tell you Mr. Peskov is lying. I mean, it's obviously a ludicrous claim. Yeah, it's so ludicrous. The United States doesn't assassinate presidents. They said it was a ludicrous claim. The U.S. had nothing to do with this. We don't even know what happened here. That is just crazy to hear from anyone working for the U.S. government. We don't know what happened, just like they didn't know what happened with the Nord Stream pipeline. They don't know what happens with anything, despite the fact that the United States has the biggest and most powerful and secret intelligence agencies inside of the world, notably the CIA and other branches of national security offices. All of these things working in concert, multiple places around the world, multiple officers around the world. None of that matters because, hey, we don't know what happened here. It's not believable, obviously. But going forward, Russia doubled down on its bellicose rhetoric later Thursday when Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov told local media that relations between the U.S. and Russia are on the verge of an open armed conflict, meaning it's not, in his words, if it's an open armed conflict, then it's not the United States or not Russia fighting a proxy war with Ukraine that the United States is fighting, but it's actually Russia fighting the United States. And that would have a detrimental effect on not just people in other places. That would bring the battlefield home to you, those of you who are living in the United States. So these are some serious issues that are going on. What do I think is going to happen? I think that the war is coming. That's what I think. That's my opinion. I think the war is coming. The war is going to come, hit everyone like it's going to be like, what the heck just happened? How we were just going by our normal business, enjoying our life and, going shopping and everything like that. And then all of a sudden we have the world's biggest superpowers, the United States, Russia, and I believe also China would be involved inside of the biggest war since World War II. So this is what I can see happening. But the question is, are you ready for this? Just like, are you ready for the financial meltdown and this happening? Hopefully, again, you're taking preparations with these stories and not taking them lightly.